Next board champ fold, so we're heads up on the flop. What are my options here? I mean, I could continuation bet, and my bet would look pretty strong. And then, I could try to fire like a hard turn or whatever. But I mean, I think checking back's fine as well because I've got showdown value. I'm ahead of pretty much all his, all his air, and I really don't expect him to fold like any pair if he has it. So, I think checking back is fine for sure. Given that, I mean, I think he might be able to like check raise bluff here if he's got, if he has like ace jack suited or ace queen suited, maybe he just tries to get me off of the hand. So, given that I know I'm ahead here a lot, I think I'd rather just try to get the showdown and maybe pick off some bluffs. So I've got king of hearts, ace diamonds, and I mean, honestly, I think he can have maybe even as wide as like bucket eights plus. I mean, some percentage of the time he's going to be three betting like aces through kings. I think he will flat jacks here a lot because he doesn't necessarily want to. I mean, cold four betting jacks there is pretty strong, so I think he might just flat there a lot. But like queens, I think he's still pretty comfortable four betting. And kings, I mean, maybe he flats sometimes. We'll say, perhaps he calls 50% and three bets or four bets 50%. Ace king, same thing. I mean, he's gonna flat some of the time, but some percent of the time he's probably just going to, four bet and get it in. Because we do have a pretty aggressive dynamic. I mean, even though his move would look so strong, I think it's still a profitable enough play. So I could definitely see him doing that. But anyway, I mean, he can flat here with like probably like suited broadways. I think that's fairly fair to assume. I mean, maybe like jack 10, queen 10, king 10, ace 10. But I'm not 100% sure of that, and I don't know how often he's going to be flatting stuff like ace jack suited, queen jack suited. But I know he's capable of it, so we'll say that's in his range and that's not. It's kind of a way to average it out, what I expect him to have. So whatever, I gave my reasons for checking back the flop. I think it's fine. On turn of 4, interesting card because I mean it does help me, and it also, I mean certainly I'm behind like 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks, queens, kings, aces, but I'm still ahead of all his air hands. And if I do expect him to flat a hand like jack queen suited, I basically expect him to do it with the intention of trying to move me off of a hand on the turn or river if he senses weakness. So if that's really how he's going to make his profit is exploiting the fact that I think his range is tighter than it actually is. So I do expect him to bluff this turn if he's flatting a hand like jack queen suited. And since that's the case, I actually do. I expect him to probably bet this turn a lot. So I've got actually decent equity. I mean, pretty good equity on this turn. Let's say, on average, maybe 45% equity. It's a fairly large turn bet. So it's 156 plus 132. Turn bet, or turn pot size of 288. It's 132 to call. I've got roughly 45% equity, let's say. So calling the turn barrel clearly, is plus EV in and of itself. But if I expect him to fire this turn, I really am. This is a situation where I'm expecting him to fire the river almost always. Because once I call this turn, my hand looks like ace king, ace queen, maybe something like 7-8 or 6-7 that I 3-bet. And so I think he knows he has to fire the river a lot to try and get me to fold those hands. So once I call the turn, I've got 478 left. I think, given that he has, air here a decent amount, the ace queen, jack queen, ace jack hands here a lot, I feel like he's probably going to bet pretty big. 3/4 to full pot. I do even have to consider an overbet shove here. Given that I've got 480, it's not really that big of an overbet, which is what he actually does. Let's say I expect that. A $478 bet on the river is like 114% of pot. If that's the case, and on average, if he's, let's say, firing this with 100% of his range, I've got 45% average expected equity on the turn. When he bets the river, I've got an average of 45% equity. So calling turn and calling river actually does net me $9 here. So it's actually a pretty marginal spot, and it can fluctuate somewhat here. But this is like the largest, obviously the largest he can bet. I mean, if he's only betting like 100% of pot, then it becomes a little more clear. 75% of pot, 25, $26. So really, I mean, worst case scenario is he overbet shove, and I have to call a little bit more with slightly the worst of it. But I think it's an interesting spot because I think a lot of people might call turn here and fold river, which actually costs you a lot of money. You know, obviously if you're calling 132 on the turn and you're folding the river, you're going to be losing that amount 100% of the time on the river. So I think if you're not comfortable calling river and you expect him to fire the river here a lot, then you're better off just folding this on the turn. But I thought I had enough equity, and I was pretty sure he was going to barrel twice. And I also did think he had enough bluffs in his range here. It's a pretty marginal situation. Old is pretty good. Like, it's hard to really make a really good plus EV decision. But I think in this spot, like, I was able to kind of deduce his range well enough that I made a decent call. I mean, I don't think it was really anywhere near massively plus EV, but I think it was probably a little bit. And so we'll go over a couple more hands. So things you want to look for, like, and think about, obviously, how often someone's going to be barreling the river, and that's kind of a function of how light they value bet, what percentage of the time they're bluffing. And so if you kind of look at their turn range, what you think they're betting on the turn, you kind of want to think, you know, on several different rivers, how often you think they're going to continue. So yeah, I mean, board texture will definitely affect it. Like, I mean, the more likely it is that you've got a weakish range, and the more aggressive your opponent is, it's more likely that they're going to try and fire the river. Anytime the board's dry, and if you call twice on flop and turn, and it's a pretty dry board, and it's perceived that it's likely that you've got a very strong hand, certainly that'll cut down on how often your opponent is willing to bluff river, and also how light they're willing to value bet the river. I mean, you also, I guess, real quick before I go into it, you want to think about, certainly you lose money anytime you call with the worst hand or fold the best hand, but you can also make money. Let's say you get to a river and you know that your range is pretty crushed, you don't think you have the best hand, but you think your opponent's bluffing a lot and has a rather light value bet range. Well, then you can think about check raise bluffing. And so by check raise bluffing, you're actually making money because you're getting him to fold the best hand. So that should also be in the back of your mind. Are there certain river cards that you might be able to check raise bluff? And if that's the case, that'll also boost your bottom line because in addition to losing money by folding the best hand or calling with the worst hand, you're actually making money by getting him to fold the best hand. And I won't really go into the math behind that, but it's just kind of logical that if you can sometimes get him to fold a better hand than yours, you're going to be making some money.